Today, we heard once again about Lindsay's confession regarding taking her children's lives and what she said she did in those moments and said in those moments. Today was day 18, where the defense rested. This witness looked into the camera, making me think at times that I was watching The Office instead of a trial. And Attorney Reddington got a little bit sassy, so let's go through a recap for day 18. The day started with the defense's final witness, Dr. Philip Resnick. He testified via Zoom because a medical issue prevented him from traveling to Boston. Resnick has decades of experience in forensic psychiatry. He has been involved in a number of high-profile cases, including the case of Andrea Yates. He evaluated Lindsay for about 3 hours in May of 2023, so roughly 4 months after the children's lives were taken. He also interviewed her parents and reviewed her medical and psychiatric records. Resnick testified that psychological testing performed on Lindsay did not show evidence that she was exaggerating or faking her symptoms. He actually said that testing showed the opposite, that she had a tendency to minimize her symptoms. His opinion on diagnosis was bipolar II disorder with severe depression, and he testified that Lindsay was, quote, frankly psychotic on January 24th. He said that Lindsay was not psychotic every minute of that day, however. He acknowledged that she was able to function. She made a snowman with 2 of the children, took Cora to the doctor, and completed normal activities. According to Resnick, the psychosis became critical when Lindsay experienced what he described as a command hallucination after Patrick had left the home that day. Resnick testified that Lindsay described hearing a voice commanding her to take the lives of her children and then take her own. He also described what is called a delusion of influence. Lindsay told him that she felt like an outside force had taken control of her body and that she was in a dreamlike state. Resnick compared it to Lindsay being a puppet with someone else pulling the strings. He also discussed what he calls altruistic filicide, meaning a parent takes a child's life while irrationally believing that they are actually acting in the child's best interest. According to Resnick, Lindsay believed that if she died, her children could not continue without her. He testified that her thinking had become so distorted that she believed that Cora, Dawson, and Callan would be better off in heaven with her rather than living on earth without her. His opinion was that Lindsay was not criminally responsible because she could not conform her behavior to the law while under the influence of that command hallucination. The Commonwealth then cross-examined this witness. The prosecutor confronted Resnick with his own previous writing stating that command hallucinations can be fabricated and that people who genuinely hear commands do not always obey them. She also compared Lindsay's case to Andrea Yates' case, pointing out that Yates repeatedly sought hospitalization and attempted to resist thoughts of harming her children. The prosecutor asked if Lindsay heard the voice and immediately acted. Resnick said that she did not. He said that Lindsay had previously experienced impulses to harm the children and had resisted those impulses until she became overwhelmed by the command hallucination. There was a question that the prosecutor asked that was ultimately stricken from the record. She was discussing Resnick's testimony that Lindsay was afraid her children would be taken away if she fully disclosed what she was experiencing. The prosecutor asked whether it was better to kill them than to have them taken away. Reddington objected, and the question was struck. Once Resnick's testimony was completed, the defense rested their case without Lindsay Clancy testifying. Let me know if you were surprised by that or if you expected her not to testify. The Commonwealth then began their rebuttal case with forensic psychiatrist Dr. Avram Mack, and his opinion was much different than Dr. Resnick's. Mack interviewed Lindsay twice in April of 2026 and reviewed medical records and investigative materials. He diagnosed Lindsay as having suffered from a major depressive episode, possibly along with anxiety and obsessive thinking. But he said he found no evidence that she had experienced mania or hypomania, so he did not believe there was enough evidence to diagnose her with bipolar disorder. He also did not believe the things Lindsay had reported before January 24, 2023 necessarily proved psychosis. For example, Lindsay once asked her mother, "Can you hear my thoughts?" Mack characterized that as reality testing. He said the fact that she was questioning whether someone else could hear her thoughts showed an ability to question her own perception of reality. He also testified that Lindsay's fear that her children could be taken away and her belief that medications had damaged her body or brain were not necessarily delusions. He then gave the jury his ultimate opinion. Lindsay suffered from a mental illness, but she retained the capacity required to be held criminally responsible for what she did. He pointed to her functioning throughout January 24th, including taking Cora to the pediatrician, driving normally, communicating with people, and completing ordinary tasks. He also described her actions that evening as organized and goal-directed. Mack testified about Lindsay's account of The Voice and January 24th as well. According to him, Lindsay described it as a loud male voice that told her to kill the children and then herself. He said Lindsay told him that as she took each child's life, she said, "Go to God." Mack testified that statement actually contributed to his opinion that Lindsay understood what she was doing was wrong. And then Attorney Reddington began his cross-examination, and this became very contentious. Reddington first established that Mack is being paid for his work for the Commonwealth and that Mack did not personally interview Lindsay's family, friends, co-workers, or Patrick while he was forming his opinion. Mack testified that he relied on Lindsay herself, records, and other materials, including Patrick's prior testimony. Reddington then went through Mack's professional background at great length. And if you would like to hear this entire cross-examination, I made a note that it starts at around 6 hours and 5 minutes into the trial day. Now, I was watching through Court TV, so it may be different depending on where you watch it, but it's at around that point if you would like to watch it all. He emphasized Mack's experience in areas involving children, adolescents, and substance use, and repeatedly questioned how much specialized experience Mack actually has in pregnancy and postpartum psychiatry. Mack pushed back, describing himself as a general psychiatrist with several areas of focus, and explained that he has had experience involving pregnant patients and high-risk maternity care. Reddington also established that Mack was brought into this case through Park Dietz and Associates. That name is significant because Dr. Park Dietz testified in the Andrea Yates case. The controversial testimony he gave regarding a supposed Law and Order episode later became an issue in that case. When Reddington attempted to get into those details, the Commonwealth objected, and that objection was sustained. Mack also acknowledged that he and another Commonwealth expert, Dr. Kirk Heilburn, jointly interviewed Lindsay. Reddington then zeroed in on something Mack had said about Lindsay having a lifelong resistance to medication. Reddington repeatedly asked Mack where that information came from and challenged whether Lindsay had actually told him that. At one point, Reddington said, "She didn't tell you that." The exchange became increasingly heated as Reddington challenged Mack's interpretation of Lindsay's history and the foundation for some of his conclusions. Those were the only two witnesses today, so ultimately the jury heard two very different opinions. One forensic psychiatrist saying that Lindsay Clancy was psychotic, she was under the control of a command hallucination, and she was not able to conform her actions to the law. And on the flip side, they heard from a different forensic psychiatrist saying that Lindsay was not psychotic. She was depressed, and she still had the ability to understand and control what she was doing. Let me know your thoughts on day 18. What would you be thinking right now as a juror? And if you saw the cross-examination of Dr. Avram Mack, tell me what your thoughts were during that. The rebuttal case for the Commonwealth should wrap up early next week, and then we'll have closing statements, and then the case will go to the jury so they can begin deliberating. Let me know your thoughts. I'll be back with a day 19 recap on Monday, and until then, and most importantly, rest in peace to the 3 children at the center of this case, and the 3 children that this jury will have in mind when they do begin deliberating. Cora, Dawson, and Callan Clancy.